My parents texted, "We need space. Please don't reach out anymore." My aunt liked the message. I simply replied, "Of course. I'll cancel my direct deposits first thing." By midnight, the family trust was frozen. The vacation fund emptied, and the estate taxes were their problem again. At 2 a.m., my brother called me 26 times. I just sent one message back, "Wishing you all the distance you asked for." That was before they noticed what I took with me. I, 32 am, stared at the text message for exactly 4 minutes before my hands stopped shaking. The words sat there on my screen, clinical and cold, like a termination notice from a job I'd poured my life into. My parents wanted space. They needed me to stop reaching out. Below their message, a small heart icon glowed. My aunt had liked it. That single gesture told me everything about how coordinated this was, how the entire family had discussed me behind my back and reached this consensus together. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. Part of me wanted to call immediately, to ask what I'd done wrong, to beg for an explanation. That's what the old me would have done. The version of myself who spent the last 8 years financing their lifestyle while they critiqued every decision I made. Instead, I typed out a simple response about canceling my direct deposits and set my phone face down on the desk. The backstory made the message somehow worse. After Dad's company collapsed 6 years ago, I'd stepped in without hesitation. Fresh out of business school with my first real job, I'd rerouted 30% of my salary directly into their account every month. When Mom's medical bills started piling up 3 years later, I increased it to 40%. I paid for my brother's wedding. I covered the property taxes on their house twice when they couldn't manage it. I funded family vacations I was too busy to attend. And through it all, they criticized my career choices, my apartment, my refusal to settle down with someone they approved of. Last month, I'd missed my cousin's birthday party because of a work deadline. That was apparently the final straw. My brother had sent a long message about how I was becoming distant and cold, how success had changed me, how I didn't prioritize family anymore. I'd apologized and promised to do better. Their response was this text asking me to disappear. I opened my laptop and logged into the family trust account. Dad had made me a co-trustee 5 years ago when he'd needed someone financially responsible to help manage Gran's estate after she passed. He'd probably forgotten about it in the chaos of his own struggles. I certainly hadn't advertised the access. The trust held about $200,000 in various accounts and investments. Money that was technically mine as much as anyone else's, though I'd never touched it. My finger hovered over the freeze account button. This was the nuclear option. This would make everything infinitely worse. But something crystallized in my mind as I sat there in my quiet apartment, surrounded by the life I'd built through 80-hour work weeks and sacrifice. They wanted distance. They wanted me gone. I could give them exactly what they asked for. I clicked freeze and watched the status change to restricted. Then I moved to the vacation fund account that Mom managed, another account I had access to from when they needed help setting up automatic payments. $43,000 sat there, money they'd been saving for a Mediterranean cruise they'd planned for next spring. I transferred it to my personal savings account. The transaction processed in seconds. The estate taxes were due in 2 months. I'd been planning to cover them as I had for the past 3 years, since the trust income didn't quite stretch far enough and Dad's pension barely covered their living expenses. I opened my banking app and deleted the scheduled transfer. Let them figure it out themselves. The property tax bill would hit around the same time. I deleted that scheduled payment too. Then I started going through every other financial connection I had to them. The insurance policy I paid for on their car. Canceled. The subscription services I'd bundled them into on my accounts. Removed. The credit card I'd given them for emergencies that I paid off monthly. Frozen and then canceled. Each click felt like cutting a rope that had been pulling me underwater. My phone started buzzing around midnight. My brother's name flashed on the screen. I declined the call. He tried again immediately. Declined. A text appeared asking me to call him urgently. I ignored it. My aunt called next. I sent her to voicemail. Then Mom called. Then Dad. I silenced my phone and went back to my laptop. There was one more thing. The digital files. For years, I'd been the family's unofficial IT person and document keeper. I had backup drives full of their tax returns, insurance policies, medical records, property documents, old photos, everything they'd ever asked me to digitize and store safely. I'd done it because I was good at organizing and they weren't. Now I realized it gave me leverage they'd never expected me to use. I copied everything to an encrypted drive, then deleted all their access to the shared cloud storage. Every folder, every file, gone from their view. They could recover some of it eventually, but it would take time and money and considerable frustration. The thought brought me no joy, just a cold satisfaction that they'd understand exactly what it felt like to lose something you'd taken for granted. By 2 in the morning, my brother had called 26 times. I finally typed out a response. I told him I was simply respecting their wishes and giving them the distance they'd requested. Then I muted all family contacts and set my phone aside. Sleep didn't come easily. I lay in bed watching shadows move across the ceiling, replaying years of interactions through this new lens. The times they'd called me selfish for focusing on my career while I paid their bills. The way my brother had bought a boat last summer with money I knew he didn't earn himself. My aunt's constant comments about how I was too proud, too independent, too unwilling to ask for help, while I helped everyone else without being asked. Morning arrived with my phone showing 63 missed notifications. I ignored them all and went to work. My boss noticed I seemed distracted during our meeting, but I pushed through and delivered my presentation. I wasn't going to let their drama derail what I'd built. That was the point, wasn't it? I'd sacrificed my 20s to build a career and financial stability, and I'd shared every benefit with people who apparently saw it as an obligation rather than a gift. 3 days passed before I finally read their messages. My brother alternated between anger and begging. He wanted to know what I'd done, why the accounts were frozen, where the vacation money had gone. He said Mom was crying. Dad had chest pains and had to go to the emergency room. My aunt called me vindictive and cruel. They all demanded I fix it immediately. None of them apologized. None of them acknowledged what they'd done. It was all about what I'd done in response. I sent one group message to all of them. I explained that I'd taken their requests seriously and was removing myself from their financial life as completely as they'd removed me from their emotional one. The trust was frozen pending legal review of my co-trustee status. The vacation fund money was compensation for 8 years of support they'd apparently seen as insufficient. I wouldn't be covering any more expenses, bills, or emergencies. They'd wanted space, and space meant complete independence. I wished them well. Then I blocked all their numbers. Update 1. 2 weeks later, a lawyer's letter arrived at my office. My parents were threatening to sue for the vacation fund money. Their attorney claimed I'd stolen from a joint account, which was technically incorrect. My name was on the account with full withdrawal privileges. I forwarded the letter to my own lawyer, a sharp woman I'd worked with on some contract reviews for my company. She laughed when she read it. She told me they had no case and that the letter was meant to intimidate me into backing down. She drafted a response outlining my legal rights to the account and included a detailed list of every financial contribution I'd made to my parents over 8 years. The number shocked even me when I saw it totaled. Nearly $400,000. The vacation fund withdrawal looked like a rounding error in comparison. Her letter also addressed the trust situation. As co-trustee, I had every right to freeze accounts if I suspected mismanagement or if family relationships had deteriorated to the point where joint oversight was impossible. She suggested my parents might want to pursue a formal trustee removal process, which would require a court hearing where all financial decisions would be reviewed publicly. They dropped the lawsuit threat after receiving that letter. My brother tried a different approach. He showed up at my apartment building one evening, waiting in the lobby until I came home from work. I saw him through the glass doors and considered turning around, but something made me push forward and face it. He looked tired, older than his 35 years. He asked if we could talk, and I told him we could do it right there in the lobby where the security cameras would record everything. That seemed to deflate him a bit, but he nodded. He wanted to know why I was doing this. He claimed they'd only asked for space because I seemed stressed and disconnected, and they thought I needed time to focus on myself. The lie was so transparent, it was almost insulting. I asked him if that was why my aunt liked the message, if that was why none of them had reached out before that text to ask if I was okay. I asked him how many times in the past year any of them had asked about my life without immediately following up with a request or complaint. He had no answer for that. I told him about the spreadsheet my lawyer had created. Every transfer, every payment, every covered bill. I told him I'd realized something while looking at it. They'd never once said thank you. Not in 8 years. They'd treated my money like it was theirs by right, like I owed them something for the crime of being successful while they struggled. He tried to argue that family helped each other. I agreed. I asked him what he'd done to help me lately. He said he'd always been there for emotional support. I asked him when. When had he checked on me during my 80-hour weeks? When had he noticed I stopped dating because I couldn't afford it after sending them 40% of my income? When had any of them celebrated my promotion instead of immediately calculating how much more I could send them? He left without saying goodbye. Update 2. A month after I cut them off, my cousin reached out. She wasn't part of the immediate drama, living 3 states away and maintaining a cautious distance from family politics. She asked if we could video chat, and something about her tone made me agree. She told me she'd heard bits and pieces of the situation from various relatives, all painting me as the villain. But she'd also remembered things. She remembered being at Thanksgiving 2 years ago when my aunt had loudly calculated how much I must be making based on my car and apartment, then suggested to my parents that they should ask for more help. She remembered my brother joking about how I was the family ATM. She remembered my mother complaining that I'd bought myself a nice watch instead of contributing extra to their property tax that year, even though I'd already covered half of it. She apologized for not speaking up at the time. She said she'd convinced herself it wasn't her business, that every family had their dynamics. But watching me get cut off and then blamed for responding had made her realize she'd been complicit through silence. I appreciated her honesty more than she probably knew. She was the first person in my family to acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the villain in this story. Through her, I learned what was happening on their end. The estate taxes had come due, and without my contribution, my parents couldn't cover them. They'd taken out a loan at an interest rate that made me wince when she told me. My brother had to cancel a planned vacation because Dad had asked him for money instead. My aunt, who'd liked that initial message, had been approached to help and had suddenly discovered she wasn't as financially comfortable as she'd been pretending. The Mediterranean cruise was canceled. Mom was apparently devastated, refusing to accept that the money was gone. She kept insisting I'd stolen it, that I'd tricked my way onto the account somehow. Dad had tried to access the trust to cover their immediate bills and discovered the freeze. The bank had explained he'd need court approval to remove me as co-trustee, which would mean lawyers and fees and time they didn't have. My cousin said the family was fracturing. Some sided with my parents, claiming I'd overreacted and should be the bigger person. Others were quietly questioning the narrative, doing their own math on how much I'd contributed over the years. She said Thanksgiving this year was going to be extremely awkward, and she was considering skipping it entirely. I told her she should do whatever felt right for her. I wouldn't be going either way. Update 3. 3 months in, and the distance I'd created had given me clarity I'd never had before. I'd started therapy shortly after cutting contact, initially to process what felt like grief. My therapist helped me understand that I'd been in a codependent relationship with my entire family, playing the role of savior while they played the role of perpetual victims who never quite got stable enough to stop needing saving. She asked me what I'd been sacrificing. The list was longer than I expected. I hadn't taken a real vacation in 5 years. I'd been living in a cheaper apartment than I could afford because the difference went to them. I'd turned down social invitations because I was always tired from work stress and financial stress. I'd ended a relationship 2 years ago partially because I couldn't explain where all my money went without admitting I was supporting my entire family. I'd been living half a life, and they'd never even noticed. With the money that used to go to them, I started rebuilding. I found a better apartment with actual space and natural light. I took a weekend trip to the mountains and remembered what it felt like to relax. I started dating again, casually, just to remember how to connect with people who didn't want anything from me except my company. Work improved too. Without the constant background stress of family drama and financial strain, I found myself more creative, more engaged. My boss pulled me aside one day to say I seemed different lately, more confident. I got assigned to a high-profile project I'd been hoping for. Then the inheritance issues surfaced. Grand's estate had other components beyond the trust, including a property that was meant to be split among her grandchildren. My parents had been managing the sale process, with the understanding that proceeds would be divided equally. My cousin called to warn me that she'd overheard my mother saying they might exclude me from the distribution as punishment for my actions. I called my lawyer immediately. She reminded me that inheritance law didn't work that way, that my parents couldn't unilaterally decide to cut me out of Grand's will. She sent a formal letter to the estate attorney handling the property sale, making it clear I expected my full share and would pursue legal action if necessary. The property sold 2 weeks later. My share was $78,000. It appeared in my account without ceremony or communication. I never heard from my parents about it. No explanation or acknowledgement that they'd considered stealing my inheritance. I put the money toward a down payment on my own place. A real home, not just an apartment. Something that was mine, built with money that was truly mine, free from the weight of obligation and resentment. Update 4. 6 months after that initial text message, I got an email from my father. Not a text, not a call, but a formal email to my work address, which told me how serious he was about reaching me despite the blocks. He wanted to talk. He said they'd been in family counseling, that the therapist had helped them see patterns they'd been blind to. He didn't apologize directly, but he acknowledged they'd taken my support for granted. He said they'd been struggling financially for so long that they'd forgotten what it was like to manage without a safety net, and having me as that net had prevented them from making harder changes they should have made years ago. He asked if I'd be willing to meet with them and their therapist, just to talk. No expectations, no demands. He said they wanted to understand my perspective and find a way forward, even if that forward didn't include financial support. I sat with that email for a week. I showed it to my therapist, talked it through with my cousin, even discussed it with the woman I'd been dating for 2 months who'd heard the whole story by then. Everyone agreed the decision was mine, but they encouraged me to at least consider it. I replied and told them I'd think about it. I wasn't ready to meet yet, but I was open to the possibility eventually. First, I needed to see sustained change in their behavior, not just words in an email. I needed them to demonstrate they could manage their own finances, their own lives, without me as a backup plan. My brother sent his own message a few days later. It was shorter, less eloquent, but somehow more genuine. He apologized for calling me an ATM behind my back, for taking advantage of my generosity, for not defending me when the family turned on me. He said he'd gotten a second job to help with Dad's expenses and had learned quickly how hard it was to balance everything. He said he understood now why I'd been stressed, why I'd missed events, why I'd seemed distant. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He just said he was sorry and that he hoped someday I'd let him try to be a real brother instead of another person with their hand out. I didn't reply to that one, not because I was angry, but because I didn't know what to say yet. The hurt was still too fresh, the boundary too new to risk weakening it. My aunt never reached out. She'd apparently doubled down on her position that I was selfish and cruel, using the situation as evidence in her ongoing narrative about young people these days. My cousin said she'd stopped attending family functions where my aunt would be present, and several other relatives had done the same. The family was reshaping itself around the fault lines this conflict had revealed. I'd started that reshaping with one simple word: no. No, I wouldn't continue financing a life I wasn't welcome in. No, I wouldn't accept blame for setting boundaries. No, I wouldn't light myself on fire to keep them warm. The revenge had been necessary, not because I wanted to hurt them, but because I needed to prove to myself that I could choose myself first, that I didn't owe them access to my life, my money, or my energy just because we shared blood. Sometimes at night, I still wondered what would have happened if I'd responded differently to that text. If I'd begged, if I'd apologized for whatever imagined slight had triggered their rejection. But then I'd look around my new home, feel the absence of that constant financial strain, remember what it was like to go a full week without a request for money or a criticism disguised as concern. I'd given them exactly what they asked for: distance. And in that distance, I'd finally found space to become the person I was supposed to be all along. Someone who helped because he wanted to, not because he was expected to. Someone who understood that real family doesn't keep score, doesn't weaponize support, doesn't mistake generosity for obligation. They'd wanted me gone, and I'd left. What I took with me wasn't money or documents or access to accounts. What I took was something far more valuable: my self-respect, my future, and my freedom. Those were things they'd never valued anyway, so I doubted they'd even notice they were missing until it was far too late to get them back.